Oh yes, pale blood. Huh. Well, you've come to the right place. Yharnam is the home of blood administration. You need only unravel its mystery. But where's an outsider like yourself to begin? Easy, with a bit of Yharnam blood of your own. But first, you'll need a contract. Good. All signed and sealed. Now, let's begin the transfusion. Oh, don't you worry. Whatever happens, you may think it all a mere bad dream.
Ah, you found yourself a hunter. Sentence these fiends to death. Far away from home, deep within the forest, in front of a waning fire, sat Yamamura in contemplation. On a hunt in foreign lands, it was not so strange for the mind to slip back towards home. But where was Yamamura's home? That, he gathered, was right where he was. While others settled and built around them, he did not. He could not relate to the behavior. Not while there was a whole world wide open for him. At times, it was hard, and he longed for the comfort of a house, a bed, and perhaps a woman. But then there also were the times like these, when he sat before the fire, looking into the dark forest in a new land. An owl sat somewhere and made itself known, like it also was content in the moment. Skittering paws sounded in the underbrush. He loved such moments, and he was thankful that he had enough awareness to acknowledge their appearance and to enjoy them. But life was rarely ever perfect, and a bitterness accompanied his pleasant thoughts. He could not gain the peace he used to while he roamed, for a large and horrible creature had occupied his dreams. While escorting and providing vanguard for a caravan of merchants, a large beast had one night surprised them with its size, ferocity, and visage. It had devoured the tradesman and left amidst Yamamura's confrontation. The tragedy had made a fury take hold of him, and he set after the beast with little afterthought. Though when the thought did catch up with him, he had grown tired, but ultimately did not decide against the hunt. He thought it proper to see the tradesman avenged, potentially spare further victims, and finish a glorious battle to the death. The positive outweighed the negative, the latter being mostly the fatigue he had felt back then. The flames started to subside, and the growing embers mesmerized him. bringing about the unique calm only known to the vagabond. In such stillness, he became one with the nature. The hard and firm dirt on which he sat became soft and formed with his body. The tree he leaned against was now a gentle rest for his back, and not a hard and uncomfortable obstacle it previously was. The hooting owl became the melody that beckoned the peaceful sleep. He was quick to resume the uncanny tracks left by the murderous beast. Easy doing in the forest as the huge body broke ferns and brambles while leaving massive markings in the soft ground. His mind did not wander to where his travels would take him after the Battle of the Beast was done. He never thought of the distant future, but of the eventual time when he would have to lay traps again, as civilization had yet to appear. Despite being in dense forests, it was like walking on a well-trampled path. Such was the state the ravenous apparition left behind itself. Pushing away a half-broken branch, he came to a stop at a large oak. There he stood, looking both to his right and his left. The trunk bore a noticeable mark, that of a forceful push impacting with the bark. It clearly indicated that a heavy body had violently brushed against the tree's surface, but in such an unfortunate manner that it was problematic to discern in which direction it had proceeded. He gathered that it had come from his approaching direction, hit the tree and turned, but in which way? He looked to the right and saw that one of the tall birches had one of its branches cut off. To the left he saw more trampled grass and bushes. Both being equally promising leads, he decided after some thought, in the increasingly sunlit forest, to investigate the direction of the broken branch. He walked a few yards straight ahead after passing the branch, and thought to see another broken example. It was, however, not broken in the same fashion, or perhaps even at the same occasion, but he pressed on just to be sure. Further down he was eventually determined that this direction was not the one, and he started to make his way back to the confusing tree. When he grew closer to the origin point, he heard clumsy and numerous footsteps coming from where he had first approached the tree. He stopped and waited to get the first impression of the owners of said footsteps. He estimated a band of 6 individuals, not heavily equipped, but not lightweight. They did not say a word amongst themselves. The sounds of feet trampling the growth stopped, and a low mumble ensued. He crept closer, making no sound that even he could hear. From behind the bushes he beheld a band of formally clad men, carrying little more equipment than himself. Their garb was, however, different. Yamamura's that of a proper traveler, agile and sturdy boots that his loose-fitted pants was tightly tucked into, a coat warding for the bad weather, and a scarf. They looked like city men of this country, and the formal kind. He could vaguely recall their outfit to hold some degree of authority in the communities. Deep blue coats with waist-length mantles over their shoulders. He concluded that, though they may be formidable opponents, judging by the strange armaments they preferred to carry over travel necessities, he would dare approach them. He started to loudly make himself known by being equally as clumsy as them while walking along the wooden grounds. The whole group was immediately alerted, some even reaching for their weapons, but never drawing them.
"Hold there, stranger!"
One of them shouted at him.
"Not many travelers this far out. Chances are you being a fellow hunter,
The man was well spoken, and his voice was distinct like a leader's would. He had long blonde hair, and looked not as surprised as his companions. "That is correct," Yamamura answered. The man looked at him up and down with a curious expression, trying to make sense of his character.
"Mayhaps."
He pointed towards the damaged tree.
"You are even hunting the same prey."
He nodded. The company relaxed, and while not voicing any opinions among themselves, returned to ordinarity. The blonde man leaned into the tree, placing a hand on its surface, and smelled at the markings. He turned back to Yamamura.
"Have you seen it? Do you know of the despicable vermin that you hunt?"
The fury and contempt the man must have felt for this prey was so noticeable in his voice that it could be mistaken as being directed at him. "I do. It slayed the company I traveled with."
"Honorable revenge, eh?"
He answered gaily, as if pleased with the response.
"No finer purpose for a hunt."
He reached out his arms towards him.
"Since we follow the same prey, why not join our league?"
The forest naturally keeps one more alert with the abundance of sounds. Birds' song, the call of distant wildlife, the breaking of branches and rustling of leaves made by elusive critters. Little had been said amongst the party of the chance encounter. When they however left the forest and emerged in rolling hillscapes out from a distinct tree line, the dour mood vanished along the shadow of the forest leaves. Their footsteps became lighter and faster. Yamamura could tell it was not the freedom of open terrain that increased their movement, but something that had come over their minds, distinguished typically as the thrill of the hunt.
"You are not from here, eh?"
The blond man, who he had come to know as Walter, inquired suddenly over his back.
"Don't feel ashamed, my friend. We are foreigners as well."
"You don't look the part."
"No, I suppose not. Not considering your distinction. You must think we all look the same.
Yamamura did not want to be rude by confirming what Walter thought of him. Though his new companion's unpredictable temper had never been aimed at him, he was not one to provoke it. You might be right. Then I suppose the same applies to you.
I will need to see your people first. Thus far I have only seen you. Tell me then, what brought you so far from home?
I travel.
That I have deduced. But for what purpose?
Why does your company travel? Walter quickly glanced back at the line of men touring behind them.
We hunt. More so than travel. Wherever the hunt takes us. Is it the same for you?
Sometimes. But I just travel. Walter examined him. He even slowed down his quick pace to do so. His expression suggested he was undecided between finding his purpose humorous or unsatisfactory. He chuckled and looked ahead.
You are a strange man, Yamamura. In a strange land. Fits perfectly, don't you think?
The hills turned softer, and large pastures with grazing sheep or cows signaled the first signs of civilization. Though comforting in a way, it brought a frown to Walter's forehead. He stopped, and the rest of his fellows made a halt precisely on his cue. It was obvious that rather than following Walter, they were all driven by a singular and shared purpose, as they acted individually, but hauntingly similar. They looked around, spying over the fields. Some left the line formation and scanned their close surroundings in such a coordinated manner, Yamamura thought there was a conversation going on that he simply did not hear.
Tarnation!
Walter cursed. A forest was much more suitable for hunting. Out in the open, especially with other adjacent fauna, the hunt grows troublesome when the trail turns faint.
What say you, foreign hunter?
Yamamura looked to the cows, who had turned their heads their way, curiously chewing their grass. There must be a farm. Walter too turned his head towards the livestock.
Our beast could never resist the temptation. Search the pasture lands for cadavers. We'll inquire at the master of the lands.
It was not the tone of an order, more like a statement on procedure. There were no arguments or roles appointed. Walter simply turned away and headed up to the center of a mild hilltop, placed his hands on his hips, and examined the environment with a slight bobbing of his head. Eventually he twitched, as if being caught in surprise, and marched along, gaze now firmly attached to something in the distance. Feeling sheepish, Yamamura followed him. While the others spread out one by one in different directions, he followed Walter towards where he saw the beginning of a dirt road. They did not need to tread far down the road, surrounded by fields, to confirm their assessment of a farmstead. From behind a tree-dotted hill peeked a roof that soon was accompanied by smaller roofs. It was a lone farmstead, but appeared almost as a village complex. A large two-storied farmhouse, surrounded by a large yard, along with 5 lesser one-storied houses. Behind the complex stood a large barn and some chicken coops. Running around in the yard were 3 children, chasing the chickens, while a large bloodhound observed them lazily from the side. The faithful companion was the first to look their way, and he stood up as soon as he sighted them. The children soon noticed the dog's behavior and diverted their attention at the strangers. The 2 of them stopped, and the little ones ran to the large building. Yamamura approached the hound slowly, and the dog seemed to decide in silence between friend or foe without any protest of his approach. Like a proper guard, he barked warningly once he came too close, and Yamamura did not grow nearer. Thus the dog remained silent. A large-built man with broad arms and round belly, followed by a younger man that was thinner and with the semblance of a son, came out to meet them. The large man patted the dog and clicked twice with his tongue, so it slunk back behind him.
Good afternoon, sir,
Walter began.
We are inquiring about any strange happenings in these parts. Any damage to your property? Slaying of livestock?
His tone was different, almost as if the previous gruff voice had been greased away into a milder one. The man looked complacent, but not entirely warm to their presence.
That may be. What about?
Walter suddenly took on a more hostile and frantic tone.
Any damage? Beasts? Time is of the essence, you hear?
They were both shocked at his shift.
Well, there are wolves, of course. But why the asking? Are you a hunter of some sort?
Walter took an aggressive step towards them, but maintained the distance so as to not provoke them completely.
My good man,
he growled.
Tell me now if there has been any foul presence here that could have made itself known.
Yamamura tired of his unnecessary menace and stepped forward, slightly in front of Walter. We are hunting a large animal that may be of danger to many others. If there has been something strange that might be the work of such an animal, please tell us so we can be on our way. The boy looked at the father with a suggestion of recollection. The large man must have noticed it, despite not turning to look.
There was, in fact, an unnerving situation. Loud noise came from the fields one day. When we came out to look, a trail of blood was visible on the ground. We thought we heard a large animal tumbling away. We thought it just a bear, but it was strange. What bear drags a cow so far? only to leave half of it behind. It was like something had sprinted into the field and heaved up the unfortunate creature.
When?
Late yesterday.
Was it that much of a chore to start with?
Walter intercepted, wildly irritated.
Where did it go?
The farmer reached out a hand down the road.
That way. Towards Yarnum.
Yamamura recalled the village where he grew up when first spotting the growing civilization. It was the people that were different. They were working much more, working so hard they themselves had likely never contemplated the amount of effort that strained them daily. There also was a distinct glare that was thrown his way. Unique to these parts was the animosity towards strangers. They had yet to face an action manifested by it, but it was unnerving all the same. Everyone always turned their heads and narrowed their eyes suddenly, making them akin to children who believe everything they do not see does not exist. The farmlands were pleasant, however, and stirred a long slumbering nostalgia. Not too wide spaces between the small farmsteads, just 2 or 3 fields. But instead of the mountain that rose up behind the place he saw in memory, here there was a mountainous town. And it was a town like no other. There were innumerable rooftops, adorned with uncountable spires. A town so grand that it seemed to be structured on several foundations atop one another. Bastionic walls with an army of arrowed roofs, behind which arose another towering foundation. And at the very top of it all, the most magnificent structure was rested. A grand building with a tower at its front, standing like a lean guardsman with a watchful and shining circle clockwork. But behind it, an even larger tower loomed, suggesting there to be a town unending behind. Structures that alone would suffice for a mountain. Structures only created by gods. Walter then started to walk faster and faster until he was running. He and the other men had become focused on a smaller house adjacent to a barn. Or rather, there were pieces of a small house. 5 farmers stood crowded around a man sitting by the roadside, while 2 official-looking gentlemen stood with their arms to their side, listening to the downstruck man. Walter charged on the scene and shoved all of them aside, trying to get as close as unnecessarily possible to the sitting man.
Did you see the fiend that did this?
He shouted on the top of his lungs and gestured towards the wreckage. The man's brief look of disdain was dispelled by Walter's abrupt approach, and he blinked so rapidly that he looked as if he believed it would send the stranger away.
That way?
The man stammered out and shakily pointed further down the road. Walter must have only then noticed the large and fresh tracks, and in a rage let out a scream that were echoed by his peers. The other natives must have thought they meant them harm, as they almost considered seeking shelter. But Walter and the foreign party all rushed away and unholstered their firearms, waving with axes in the air. They ran down the road, now provoking even more dramatical reactions from the farmers. But the growing absence of the locals suggested that another horror had stricken them. The beast was near. Yamamura did not join the war cry, but was astonished at how they managed to manifest their fury for so long. Then it showed itself. As if coming to meet them, it appeared from a field as it breached through a small stable, sending the horses running in fear. The beast was like no animal or predator. A large, slithering and furry body heaved itself through the wooden structure and landed on the road. It walked on 9 legs, the frontal 4 pair resembling arms, while the latter 5 looked like humanoid legs, all bearing terrible and curved claws. It was very slender, almost emaciated, with its ribcage being the most broad area of its body, and along its side appeared limp growths that resembled lesser bestial but humanoid arms. Its neck reminded of a winding snake, ending with the head of a long face. It was a terrifying crossing between a lizard and a dog. Furry but narrow-featured and yellow glowing eyes. It spat out a frenzied roar that was more akin to the sound of a woman being murdered. It charged, slamming down its 4 fists. The first pair was larger and looked similar to enlarged human hands with fur, while the 2 under them looked more strange and inhuman, as if they had grown improperly. The upper part of the arm was much shorter in comparison to the abnormally long forearms. The men leapt aside, and Walter stood like a mad hero, axe raised in the air, and screamed incoherently a deranged incantation of battle. They swarmed the beast like ants, and it effortlessly swiped them aside. Yamamura attempted to wield his sword like he was taught, but against such a foe, his techniques was likely considered less refined. He ran to the back as the fiend was occupied with the much louder insects that lunged at it, mindlessly swinging. They were resilient, but it did not serve them long. One flew into the grassy field, having been pummeled and tossed up by the huge fist. The man did not join the fight again. Some, however, were shoved to the ground in an attack that very well could be fatal, but they would stand back up, reanimated by the hatred flowing in their veins. Yamamura sliced at its tendons, and when they were cut, it roared in pain and turned to him with an overhead slam with an open palm. It grabbed at nothing, for he had jumped out of danger. He retaliated swiftly with cross cuts to its lower arm and hand. The screams of the companions and that of the beast started to blend together into one singular maddening sound space that alone threw him off his footing. He lost the ability to focus and stumbled, still very alert at any incoming threat. The men started to pummel the narrow side of the stomach and appeared to do a good job, as blood visibly and violently exploded from its rear, making it reel in agony and groaning pitifully. It recovered in but a few seconds and started to throw and fling its arms and legs in all directions to ward off the attackers. The aimlessness of its defense was forgiven by the strength it possessed, and 2 more of the men were struck down, having been clawed open at their chests. It finished by making a spinning motion with its whole body that ended with it standing up on its hind legs and roaring mightily. Not all were able to escape its vortex and had been thrown away by the force, not to be able to stand again. It now looked at Yamamura and reached out its arms in a menacing, welcoming-like pose. Too quickly it slammed down its entire width at him and scooped him up, grabbing him with its 4 hands. It bit down in the air while staring at him, a jaw larger for its own good, with enormous teeth that prevented any lips from covering them wholly. It started to tighten its grip, and he screamed in pain. It suddenly lost its grip, and before he fell down to the ground, its eyes had widened and its head turned upward. Walter had hacked its exposed stomach, which had eventually torn it open so blood and guts poured out from the hole. Walter did not stop and rapidly continued to hack into the flesh. It slumped down and held its 2 left arms over the wound while backing off, waving and swiping to keep Walter at a distance. This did not stop him, and he grabbed the axe with both hands, dropping the pistol and swung even harder and faster. He screamed the whole time. He was not wavered by the beastly arms, but hacked away at them. Finally the beast had stopped, due to its massive wound, but Walter continued. He approached like a mad woodcutter, and again brought his axe down at its head. Long after it had collapsed and laid still, he continued to hack. What finally stopped him was that the axe got stuck, and he did no longer have the strength to pull it out. In his attempt to do so, he stumbled backwards and fell on his behind. He sat still and breathed heavily and grunted. He started to crawl clumsily and fatigued to the carcass. He seemed to be oblivious to the fact that he had rescued Yamamura, and that none of his companions had lived through the battle, not even bothering to see their status. He crawled towards the body, and with his bare hands started to rip at the flesh, grunting and heaving. He started to chew gluttonously at the hunk of meat he had gathered, and with a piece in his mouth, returned to rip another from the body. Yamamura, who now had recovered from the trauma, could not bring himself to stand up, nor could he look away. He sat supported with his arms behind him, and only watched while the courteous and somewhat brusque man chewed and chewed down piece by piece, every part of the flesh. He did not appear starving, nor like he enjoyed it. He only saw a consuming fire in his eyes, the flames of hatred yet burning within him. A miserable-looking pair sat at a bar in a tavern. Yamamura had his eyes fixed on the wooden surface of the desk. On the stool next to him sat Walter, staring straight ahead at the red liquor bottles. He was still covered in the dried, brown blood of the beast. They had not spoken a word to one another since he had grown satisfied with the fiend's flesh, or had just become unable to consume any more of it. They had shared a look, and both must have realized they needed rest and had eventually entered the first door that appeared open to them. The barkeep finally mustered some courage from the other side of the desk and walked up to them.
Do you need anything?
He asked nervously, sounding as if he not exclusively referred to the services of his establishment, but in general. Yamamura looked up at him while Walter's eyes remained where they were.
Do you have anything strong?
For your wounds?
Yamamura shook his head and made a questioning expression while he held his hand like he was holding a glass he drank from.
Oh, all right. Yes.
The barkeep turned and got a pint that he brought to one of the taps and filled it with golden liquid.
Anything for you, sir?
Walter only furrowed his brow, as if he had heard something far off and could not make out the wording properly. Maybe later. Yamamura took the glass and excused his bloodied companion. The barkeep backed off and lingered nervously, rubbing his hands for a lack of better manifesting his confoundment.
Are you certain there is nothing else I can do?
Don't worry. It's just a particular bloody hunt.
That seemed to completely shift his nerves, and he appeared relaxed. He raised his eyebrows in realization and nodded smilingly and returned to his other duties. Yamamura was just relieved that the man had left them alone. He too did not feel particularly sociable, but did not show it as much as Walter. He was now delighted in the tingling approach of relaxation, heralded by the first gulp. Walter started to slowly turn his head towards him. Very slow. It felt like a solid minute passed when he tried to center his gaze at him. He looked at him for a very long time. His eyes seemed to have a problem with fixing themselves. They looked constantly all over him. He finally removed his face from the glass and looked back at Walter.
Does it not feel strange?
I suppose. But how about you? He licked his lips anxiously. His forehead had become covered in sweat.
It feels very strange. No. It is a horrible relief.
What is?
To finally see them.
Yamamura placed down his glass pitcher in worry. Walter almost looked sick, and before he had looked utterly mad. What do you mean? Should I need to know more about you and that beast? Walter did not answer. Yamamura grew frustrated, as he now was allowed to contemplate the events. And what of your companions? What did that thing do to you? Walter's gaze turned downward to his own blood-stained gloves. He had a face of utter resignation.
From where did you say you come from again, Yamamura?
I never did.
East, no?
East of here, yes. Very far east.
That thing was too. But you have not been home for a long time. Must have.
Yamamura was not allowed to follow up on the intriguing implication, for two men came up to them. A good day. Can we presume you two slew the farmstead beast? He turned with a bothered sigh to meet their eyes. Walter only continued to defeatedly examine his hands. Yes, that is correct. To his impression, they looked rather shady. They had removed the cover of their mouths, but had kept their hats on. Modified tricone of sorts, with feather-like flaps jutting backwards. Otherwise they were dressed in long coats, and mostly in conspicuous attire of the typical everyman, although he could detect some paraphernalia that appeared to be of real protection.
Then we must praise you. We were just there and wanted to meet the accomplished hunters who did the work. 'Tis no secret there are a few problems with beasts in these parts. But of that size. Well done to you, sirs. Well done.
He did not fully receive their praise. His mind had strayed back to what he had seen in the beast's eyes as it held him in the embrace of death. It was something he never could expect he would encounter while hunting the fiend. His impression back then had been influenced by the folklore in his eastern homeland. There were myths of a god of defilement, a deity that often became the scapegoat when crops wilted or cattle fell sick. The specifics were such that this god manifested itself in vile and unnerving creatures, most commonly being associated with centipedes. There was even the legend of a time when a strange sickness struck the land and that the centipedes were supposedly accountable. But the specific legend was when these centipedes could inhabit the bodies of vile were treacherous men. Despicable criminals were said to host the augurs of defilement, and were soon to become a horrible malformation of themselves, exposing their foul nature. For the thing that Yamamura had seen in the eyes of the beast, that he had stalked for miles and miles, was the familiar eyes of a regretful sinner. Painful memories were engraved in his mind, which contained such eyes from his past, and he had hoped to never see them again. It made the encounter more horrifying and mysterious.
Is everything in order?
He had drifted for too long and became aware once more of the men that had come to show their admiration. Walter remained still. Only now he was staring at the hunters with wild eyes.
Oh, sorry. We are both a bit shaken up.
The man, closer to him, leaned towards him and looked into his eyes, but not in search of emotion, more examining the qualities of the eyes themselves. He withdrew and nodded assuringly.
I get it. We are actually a bit curious about you. Oh? You see, if you didn't know, Yharnam only sees foreigners briefly as they come for the blood administrations. Even rarely are those that come around with a knack for killing beasts. We don't mean to be a bother, but if you are curious about some hunter's work and learn more about fending off more of their ilk, ask for German at the Healing Church.
Philip had trouble dislodging the little melted lump of powder stuck in the fire mechanism of his rifle spear. He was alone in the powder keg's workshop when a sharply dressed man walked down the stairs to the large cellar room filled with either complete armaments and tools or scrapped and incomplete variants of such. He appeared somewhat similar to a constable, but the attire was not that of Yharnam's troop. But seeing that he was here, he could even be a hunter. He looked around, and as he saw Philip, he immediately started walking quickly towards him. The blond man looked intense, a very focused young face.
I am looking for hunter armaments. Perhaps you can assist in the matter.
He looked like he knew fully what he was doing, and his well-spoken tone made Philip think it a bit exciting. He was a junior member and was by no means an expert, but he knew the weapons of the workshop and their basic qualities, one of his firm interests.
Certainly. Are you new to the powder kegs? I am new, yes. Alright. Do you have any preferences? It must be devastating. Alright. Heard that one before.
He smiled to indicate the friendly jest, but the man did not flinch in his expression, which was stone cold.
Well, there is the boomhammer.
He walked over to a weapon rack and picked up a hammer that had a faulty furnace. He gave it to the man, and he felt for the grip and swung it about. He looked to be very strong and versed with any weapon.
No. Hammers are too restrictive.
Okay. There is the stake driver. He handed over said weapon he took from the nearby table. The man immediately held up his hand in refusal.
No, it won't do.
Alright. I think you need to be more specific.
It must crush the vermin, I tell you.
The man shouted, having finally lost his temper that was foretold by the slight distress underlining his voice.
All these are too sloppy. I want to tear them open. I want to see everything within lay splattered before me. There cannot be an inch of their insides that goes unsearched.
Philip became unnerved by the sudden outburst. He noticed, even now with his temper through the roof, that despite his erratic, darting eyes, the man had gone out of his way to avoid looking at him.
Alright. Now we're getting somewhere.
Not that he felt that they did, but he could think of little else to say.
Have you checked with Garment's workshop? Too clean. All of it is too precise. You will miss many crevices.
His reluctance must have been noticed, for the man composed himself.
What is your name?
Philip.
Right. I know that you do not understand what I'm after. I do not care if you think me mad. But what I need is for a specific purpose. So listen carefully. You believe this scourge is contagious, right?
Philip nodded.
Very good. Now, how do you think it is contagious?
Well, it's in the blood.
Clever. Might be. But let's follow with my theory. Let's say there are these little things in the flesh. Tiny vermin that writhe and breed inside corrupted flesh. Filthy and foul. These little maggots delight in anything that is impure, where they grow and soon decide to spread to the next impure thing. And once there is nothing impure, they have no problem making things impure. Does this sound strange?
I mean, yeah. He exhaled in frustration.
Do you lack the base understanding of any vermin? How they fester in filth?
Oh, well, I do not. But there must
be very small if they live inside the beast's bodies. Indeed, that's how they infest all that is impure and sow the seed of foulness, spreading the scourge. Now, let's say that is the reason. Would you not want a tool that would help you find these little insects and crush them? Right? That is what I'm after. A simple blade will not reach the core of the filth. Only halt it somewhat. I must be able to reach inside and find the origins of this plague.
Something lit up in his mind. A perfect fit, and he walked over to a pile of scrap metal. He rummaged around, picking up and tossing things aside to reveal a round, large metal object. He picked up a slightly curved handle with a metal mace at the end and gave it to the man.
What is this?
It is an idea that was never employed. Too heavy and unwieldy, you see. But might be exactly meant for your style. He picked up the large round thing, almost the size of a wagon wheel, revealed to be a compilation of round saw blades. You can attach this part to the handle and be able to activate the saw. Might be tricky, but there are ways to make them spin very rapidly. I'm easily cutting through hard beast bones. The man looked with wide eyes at the contraption.
Does it work?
I have not seen it done, but should be made to, if the idea holds in practice. Philip placed the round piece down, standing on its edge, and took the handle from the man. He managed to place the mace into its socket with little effort. He put weight into a thrust that jammed the handle into the mechanism. He lifted it up with effort and gave it to the man. See, kinda unwieldy. The mechanism to fire up the blades was never made, so... The man had no trouble holding the thing up and trying it out in his grip. He looked at it with starry eyes and tested his strength by swooshing the giant thing through the air as if fighting off his foes. He stopped, and with a motion like he had done it many times before, separated the wheel from the handle.
Fantastic. This is just what I was looking for.
When Yamamura officially became a hunter, it had not been the first time he entered a covenant with the murky intentions of staying. They had been a means to an end. For when those two men walked into the pub that day, a harrowed suspicion came true. He had been able to convince himself then that it had been for honorable revenge, but now he knew better. He knew it deep down, back then as well, that if he did not see this beast slain, if he did not smother out the life of his biggest fear, he would never be the same. Such can be the fate of those that stare into the eyes of maddening fear and have to struggle to stay sane. Yamamura did only what his mind demanded. But when men came with the implication that a beastly threat was not so rare after all, that same fear came instantly creeping back. He always anticipated that the urge to wander would erupt quite suddenly, but he liked what he now was. In employment as a hunter, he could encounter his fear. The town grew on him, and in time, so had even the people. He never knew when the urge to return to the road would swirl up in him, but it had not happened yet. Usually it was akin to a calling, a sensation that simply beckoned him to seek more of the world. Now, though, Yharnam still had things to show him. He would visit the Grand Cathedral whenever he had the chance. That is to say, whenever he had no work to do, or when the company of his fellow hunters did not occupy him. There was also the matter of further training himself. The hunters were very skilled, perhaps even amongst the most skilled guilds he had ever encountered. This left little time for leisure, a thing he was not commonly used to, being a roaming vagabond. But the Grand Cathedral had stolen his attention on the very first day. He had visited it the first chance he got, just to see its splendor from inside. He had been met with some resistance as the clerics was hesitant towards him, but when he had inquired about German, their demeanor towards him changed. Since then he had been welcomed there, and it was apparent that they were delighted when he further inquired about their beliefs and practices. Eventually he had come to regard the discussion about faith with a certain cleric Chiara the most compelling. Though it started with an interest in theology, the interest had shifted into the woman herself. He sensed that the feeling was shared. He had even been encouraged by her to meet shortly after lunch, as she often were dismissed from the research duties. He stood waiting in the cathedral main hall, examining the beautiful shrine statue, with the mysterious woman pouring a liquid down into the praying and wallowing figures. He had been told it represented an ancient struggle of their ancestors. It was a monument to their endurance and overcoming of the times by the help of the healing maiden, a blessed saint that had bestowed her own blood to the people, curing them. No wonder blood healing was so popular and effective, however morbid it had initially appeared to his foreign mind. He saw Chiara walk out from the side doors and waved at him as she caught his presence.
Hi Mira, how's your day been?
Good.
Oh, tell me about it. At the square?
He nodded and they walked out of the ill-fitting acoustics of the cathedral. They turned a sharp left along the cathedral exterior front, taking them to a steep, rocky hill with a quaint stairwell leading downward to a small, round area of stone with an overlook towards a valley with more houses beyond the field. There they had sat before, talking about his travels and the faith that was a stranger to him in this strange town. It was a quite isolated place, with only 2 stone houses around the little area, presumably the residence of a groundskeeper or the likes.
Ah,
She exhaled.
fresh air after being cooped up the entire morning.
She stretched her legs and leaned her head back to catch the autumn sun. Hard at work?
Ah, very much. Oh, I miss the days of teaching. Every day I feel like my knowledge fading, with the unending paperwork of their research.
Really? She chuckled and playfully jabbed at his shoulder.
No, silly. But it is a bore. Once I felt much more appreciated working with people that had a genuine and a pure interest in the faith and the gods.
While still smiling, a longing mood came over her eyes. But is it not important also? It is not just a worship, no? She tilted her head, and her look wandered over the sky in an arc.
Yes, yes.
She cracked up with a smile.
But let's not bring the dullness out here too. I want to hear more about your travels. Oh, and what is going on as a hunter?
The side of his mouth twitched upward and remained in place. I trained with German himself today.
Oh, what's he like? You've told me so little.
There's not much to say. But he is something else. Unmatched. He moves like... I don't know how to put it. Not like a human.
Oh, sounds frightening.
He is, in a way. Never have I seen similar things to what he can do. He vanishes and moves just like wind-blown mist. Like he can step into the air itself and move as he pleases. But there is something disarming about him. I thought it was his age at first, but then I really don't know.
He sounds like a kind person. I mean, with the work he does for the church. And if he is a bit scary, like you say, he must be a good man to teach you all, as the hunter protects us all.
Yeah, I agree. Yamamura was never the sociable type, and a silence was created. With her, though, it never grew unnerving, but he wished all the same to be bolder.
Miura?
She asked, then continued in a more careful tone.
Who was this man you spoke about? The one you came here with?
He looked at her, mildly astonished at the sudden mention of his former companion, who long had been absent from his mind. Right. Walter was his name. And we did not come here together.
No?
Well, it happened like so, but did not start so. She looked at him while he sat quietly thinking. He was strange, and became even stranger after the hunt. I thought he went to join the powder kegs, you know, the hunters of old Yharnam, but I never heard more of it. She nodded and once more looked back over the scenery.
Well, it's just, there have been some mentionings of hunters in the Forbidden Forest. The higher officials seemed as surprised as I.
How come?
Well, no one's supposed to be there. Sure, hunters may be more capable with danger, but no one seems to know why such a bunch has gathered there. No one seems to have a clue about it. And the only one that has spoken with the church's men is someone in a strange constable attire.
Predominantly, Yamamura's reason for venturing into the Forbidden Forest was because of rumored worry within the church. Something he would of course validate so they could put their minds at ease. Or at least, that's the attitude he displayed upon offering to do just that. At the time, it had not fully struck him, but the full potency of his curiosity overwhelmed him upon entering the Forbidden Forest. His curiosity about the strange Walter. It struck him that even after they had told him to be extra careful due to the abundance of lethal snakes, the very same curiosity had compelled him to insist. The snakes that slithered in the underbrush was more than what he was prepared for. There seemed to be no other form of fauna than the serpents, some of which were freakishly large, but as a consequence were easy to avoid. Additionally, the forest most certainly lived up to its forbidden credence, seeing how overgrown everything was. The path was hard to place amidst the dense bushes, and the sky was hard to see because of nasty branching trees. Upon venturing further in, he noted the strange obelisks, headstones that could pass as densely placed graves. He had been told, rather hastily while the clerics made more focus on the snakes, that he should be respectful around the monuments. Godly graves, as he understood it. But they lacked inscriptions, instead being marked with a spotted pattern, not too dissimilar to a fungal pattern growing within the stone itself, strange as it may appear. Not being properly prepared for such a difficult terrain, he started to wonder where the man would even be located. Seeing how he was walking on the singular apparent path, he had little choice but to follow it and hope Walter had not strayed too far from it. He was brought to a halt at the sound of a particularly large rustling in the bushes. Out from the thicket stepped a man dressed in a strange butcher's attire, mixed with that of an executioner. Prominently he wore an apron and bore a cowl with a short, tattered mantle over his shoulders. The two of them stared at each other until a second, eerily similar character emerged from up ahead, walking towards them down the path. He glanced at the large axes each of them held, and in turn did they look at the blade strapped at his side.
Such a sword. Yamamura.
He was surprised, but felt slightly less intimidated.
Yeah. Here to see Volta.
Yeah. He nodded down the path and both of them started walking ahead of him. He followed, and they stayed the path for a time until they stepped abruptly into the thicket. They walked a short bit further, jumped over a little crevice in the ground that, upon flying over it, was much deeper than it looked. Above the dense leaf crowns he saw a giant derelict windmill. The sky behind it was overtaken by dark clouds, and the wind increased its force while he examined the towering structure. They were apparently heading towards that very building, for soon enough they stood outside the wooden structure. Upon approach, Walter stepped outside with his arms in a welcoming pose. At least, Yamamura presumed it to be him, judging solely by the same noticeable garb, but adding to it was a bucket-like helmet with a single peephole for the left eye. He made a furious grunt that was barely passed as a laugh.
My friend. Still around, are you?
He nodded.
Good. Come inside. How has it been?
Good.
A hunter now, are you?
Mm-hmm. It was a provisional abode, lacking any furniture save for a lantern giving the room light. Gathered was about 5 individuals. All looked to be hunters, but none of which he knew. The 2 twin characters entered last and stood on each side of the door.
Good. Very good. I knew you to be fit for the work right as I saw you. I now have something to show you.
He grabbed a cane that leaned against the grinding pillar and retrieved a little scroll that emerged from the handle.
Now, Yamura, be careful now. You are a hunter. Truly.
His voice trembled with excitement and with a curious anger as the undertone. What are you all doing out here?
We are those that see the true threat. Apparently, hunters have not paid it any mind. Not even someone as sharp as you.
His fist had balled themselves and now trembled by the seething anger apparent in his voice. And what is it that I missed?
The vermin, you fool! What else?
He took a step back in response to the hunched approach of Walter. The beasts?
Yes, but what lies inside? What writhes and crawls from their blood, visible on all mankind? All bear this filth, horrible ghoulish aberrations, all of them carrying their vermin.
He stood straight and composed himself.
It is our league that sees them, crushes them.
How do you mean?
You're a sharp one. Sharp as that blade of yours. But never have you seemed to ponder why it is you hunt. 'Tis the vermin, you see. The root of man's impurity. The source of beasthood, and all that plays a scourge on our lives. You can kill and expunge as many monstrosities as you want. But they will not go away if not uprooted completely.
But it is the blood.
That is where they dwell. Around in our veins, and grows fat if not destroyed. They infect the good folk and spread about like a freakish, frenzied virus, you hear?
It infects. I thought the church meant that could not be possible.
Bah! Show what's possible. The church thinks it's a matter of faith. No, there is only a simple truth. That man harbors impurity. An impurity that spreads among us with every passing breath.
The image of the horrible beast that led him to Yharnam appeared in his mind. Out of every one of his prey, it had been the most horrible, the stuff of nightmares. None had come close to matching its terror, and he hoped nothing ever would. But one could only hope so much. Were his fears to never come true, he would have to slay each of man's monstrosities, many of which infested the streets of Yharnam, much like vermin. Was it something you were to show me? He made a sharp inhale that echoed from within the metal helmet and retrieved the paper scroll.
I would offer you join our league. Help us expunge this rot, wherever it can be found, for no one else does. We must be the one decent league that conduct such a service. Take part of our rune, inscribe your name, and become a member of the league.
He glanced over at the paper roll that Walter now held out before him. His eyes passed over the other fellows of the league, all brooding and taciturn characters. Walter, is this to do with that thing? The man gave a trembling nod. Upon taking one step closer, Walter swiftly retrieved a small and crude pencil that he handed over to him, but hesitated.
You must know, it is not pleasing work. you will become cursed. Perhaps even mad. But with all this vermin about, aren't we already?
He took the pen and wrote his name. Walter, after some deliberation, then rolled out the scroll to its end, revealing a symbol at the very top of the paper as it unfolded. A line with a dot at its tip, and a convex upward arc, as well as having 3 dots in a row on both sides of the line under the arc. He examined it for some time, until he peered into the black hole of the metal helmet.
Focus, and you'll come to see.
He did so. He got the impression the symbol in its entirety was more complex than its composition would suggest, like it was very foreign to him. Whoever had conjured up such a thing? As soon as his thoughts grew more profound, he thought to hear a noise. A sort of wet, slithering sound reminiscent of abundant cockroaches. He broke focus with the symbol to glance around to see what had produced the sound, but nothing had. When he turned back, it seemed the lines had grown thicker on the paper, turning a deep red like they were bleeding. He slowly leaned back as the entire symbol, paper and staff, was slowly encompassed with what appeared as minuscule red centipedes. But within the writhing mass before him, which seemed not to be acknowledged by other than himself, he still saw and heard the mark of impurity. What he saw was the nature of the beast that had been slayed, the nature that he had seen in its maw, and he knew that whatever form he had seen then had indeed sprung forth from within. Fiachra was overlooking Old Yarnam from the heights above the valley hamlet, which by no means was a meager hamlet, but word of mouth tended to not so easily be forgotten. He had sensed trouble brewing there for some time, despite the Ashen Plague nearly existing only in memory by now. But he had noticed more beasts coming from the old town, and as a product, the powder kegs struggled. A low scream, fueled by fear, erupted in a short burst. He looked back down onto the street below to see a man in strange foreign garb dart through in the middle of the street, heading towards the slope down to Old Yarnam. In his hand he held a long sword, slightly curved and with a hunter's hat, but he moved like a beast despite appearances. Fiachra leapt down and crept along the houses after him. A small trail of blood marked his way, provoking Fiachra to hurry after him. Just where the street sloped downward, he had caught up to hear the extensive and heavy breaths the man took, grunting as he ran.
Hunter!
The man turned his head and stumbled to a halt. There was nothing but fear in his eyes, wide and full of white. He inched closer and could determine that the man in fact had the typical collapsed, malformed pupil of the blood-starved. He had frozen where he stood, staring at him while he approached with his sword held in his trembling hand.
You... vermin.
Fiachra stopped. Tears began to pour from the man's face.
Everywhere. Can't you see? All this time. Still your blade, Hunter.
He turned his head down at what he held in his hand as if it had slipped his mind. The man composed himself and breathed out. Then in while he positioned the right foot forward and held the blade with both hands, breathing out once more as he centered himself. As if fired from a pistol, the man lunged into action and Fiachra was just in time able to draw his blade to deflect the thrusting attack. He jumped back as the blade swiped after him.
What madness! Soon there will be monsters from all of you.
His face was still red from the disparity, but had relaxed and his voice was that of a calm whisper. He lunged once more. His style was unlike anything Fiachra had ever seen. Each strike was filled with passionate focus. He separated his blades so as to be able to parry the quick strike and simultaneously stab back at him. But the foreign man was an adept, and despite wielding a larger blade, was as quick with it, like Fiachra was with his. The man fought with such purpose and determination, eyes blank, as if his senses were omnipotent and did not rely on vision alone. This was no mere hunter, but one with such a cause that it almost prevailed over Fiachra's own clear mind.
Stop it!
The man whispered as his face crumpled up in a teary grimace.
Please!
Fiachra kicked him to the chest and he stumbled back, landing on one knee with the blade thrust into the ground to support him. A hesitation came upon him then, one he had never felt for anyone. For with everyone before, had there been no doubt to their state. But he did not know what had come over the man. It had been a long time since he had faced someone as focused in battle as himself. But in what manner of madness could such a thing persist?
None can cleanse the vermin. Don't you know I'm sorry? That I regret what I must do. All of us are tainted already. What will become of us?
You ramble. Cease your delusion.
While his eyes conveyed deep sorrow, his mouth turned in an ailing smile, and he shook his head.
None can withstand it. None are true hunter of the church.
None with all this vermin. He lunged at him with the blade swinging in his right hand. Fiachra stepped in with his right shoulder turned, sliced upward at his wrist. The blade dropped from his hand, and Fiachra immediately sliced up his throat, then elegantly stepped behind him, so as he would not helplessly fall. One last and long exhale escaped him before blood erupted from the mouth, and Fiachra laid him down so he could see the night sky and the moon.
Fear not the night, for the dream lies beyond it.
The man smiled as his eyes became dead and his body still. He entered with the blade into his heart, lung and stomach post-mortem, and wished him a gentle ascent.
Vermin. A centipede-like creature discovered on successful hunts by League hunters. Vermin, found hidden within filth, are only seen by League confederates, and are the root of man's impurity. The League has assumed the task of finding and crushing all vermin. Perhaps there is some mercy in the madness. Those who wish to see vermin can, and those who choose to are provided with boundless purpose.